Okay, we are being recorded. So I'm not requiring that you guys use Markdown, but it's by far my preferred tool for generating content. Again, content that's intended for the web, that's what it was originally built for, as you get my guess from the name. I mean, there's markup, and then there's markdown. It's called lightweight markup. It's just a quicker and simpler way to generate HTML. And you might think, well, HTML, I mean, is there really an easier way to generate HTML? I mean, it's pretty easy already. Yeah, it is, but it's kind of verbose with all the tags and the brackets and the slashes and all that stuff. And there is a quicker and easier way to generate it. This is not the only way. I mean, there's Jade, there's Pug, there's oh god, what was the one I was looking at just the other day? I can't remember. There's other lightweight markup systems here, but this is Markdown. And here's daringfireball.net. John Gruber, who's in web development. It's good just to follow his blog on here. Just be aware that he is an Apple enthusiast. So if you are not, then you might be irritated at some of the posts. But here I just went to his projects in Markdown, and this is where, if you want to learn more about Markdown, then this is the place to go. So you can go here and you can go to basics and then learn the syntax and so on. And then the dingus here, which just means doohickey, is just a little sandbox. So you can type in Markdown. Like, for instance, I want to do like a hello world, like so. And I know that the little hashtag here is an H1. So if I click on converts, then it will show me the markup down here. Yes, there's an H1 in HTML. So like I was saying, this is based on the plain text way that we used to format like emails and other plain text, like what was it that used to exist? The Usenet. And we would deal with plain text, right? And we had to find ways of formatting. Like, how do you emphasize a word if you don't actually have a bold button or an italic button to click, or Control B or Control I? Well, you can make your text capitalized, of course, but we all know everybody hates that. So we would have different ways of doing it. So if you wanted to say, give the word some emphasis, then you might do something like this. Like, this is an emphasized word, something like that. So you put little asterisks around it in order to emphasize the word. Well, guess what? In Markdown, we borrowed that directly, and we get an emphasis tag down here. And if you want to emphasize something a lot, this is greatly emphasized. Now, it's even got little hints now. Cool. So greatly emphasized, you put a couple of asterisks around it. And guess what? If you do this, it gives you bolded text. It gives you strong. So yeah, and then if you need to do, like if we needed to do a list of items that we were posting for someone, like, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, well, you put a little hyphen at the beginning and say item 1, item 2, and item 3. And if you wanted to do a numbered list, then you would just do something like this. Ooh, look at that. Autofill. I like it. Tab. So that sort of thing. And this is, again, this is stuff that we did for many years before there was formatting in some of these systems. And Gruber just grabbed that and ran with it and said, okay, cool, I'm going to turn this into a lightweight markup system and run this off of, I think it's run on Python or something like that, where just behind the scenes, you can just convert and boom. So obviously markup is really easy to write, but this is a lot easier and more efficient. So if you do a lot of generating of stuff for the web, then this is your friend. And like I said, I think that I use this for just about everything now, almost everything. Um, I've written novels in Markdown because I like it so much better than using Word or Pages, God forbid, something like that. It's just so easy and clean and nice, and you don't have to worry about formatting or anything like that. But of course, you can attach a style sheet to it if you want to. And there are different, you don't have to do it in the little doohickey here on, daringfireball.net. there are a whole slew of different coding tools that will allow you to write in Markdown, some of which will even give you a little Markdown preview. And so, for instance, this is the like VS Code, which I think you guys have probably used before. And you guys have seen me work in this before. So this is what I'm going to be building today. One of the things I'm going to be building for the demo. And I just kind of ran through it before class and just thought I'd show it to you. This is a plugin or whatever they're called in VS Code, an extension or whatever. And so I had to install the extension. And then I had to install another extension to get the preview over here. But then once I did that, it's fine. I just code right in here. I think that Notepad++ even has Markdown support these days. So there's a lot of different editors that you can use to work on Markdown and then get it to, some of them will let you export HTML or a PDF directly from there, which is cool. So let me get rid of that and then we will build that one up. So anyway, I won't go through the whole thing here. I mean, you can see like the spreadsheet here, you can see some of the stuff that's available. Here's how you do a link. Here's how you do an image with alt text and so on. Different headings, right? And lists, we just talked about those. Nested lists, block quotes, code spans, right? You'll see me use the backticks and those to indicate code, etc. So I'll let you guys go through that. If you are interested, again, I'm not requiring that you do this in Markdown. I just recommend it. I think it's easier that way. I should mention that the tables I'm going to be doing in Markdown, those actually are not part of the official, such as it is, Markdown specification. Gruber built this like way back, I think it's about 20 years ago now. He built this thing. And he said that he attributes its popularity, and it is very popular these days. Like if you use GitHub and you generate like a README page, it's done in Markdown. And again, you see it everywhere now. And Gruber says the reason he thinks it got so popular is that he didn't mess with it. However, that means there are a couple of things that got left out. And one of them is tables. He never implemented any solution for tables in here. So the tables solution is one that was implemented by GitHub and some others. And so you have these different versions of Markdown that are called flavors. So you have like GitHub flavored Markdown or GitLab flavored Markdown or Markua or whatever. But anyway, this is the basic stuff. So that's Markdown in a really quick nutshell. I don't feel the need to go over much of it with you because, again, if you want to learn it, like I would guess maybe 20 minutes to become good at using Markdown. It's that easy and that quick. So anyway, that's what you see me using sometimes. And that's what I'm going to show you the first part of this tonight. Okay, groovy. That is quick and dirty intro to Markdown. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to generate the graphic representation of the tables, and I'm going to use this example that I did on, what was it, Wednesday, whatever was the last class. Yeah, Wednesday, right? So I did this wireframe for the recording, or these wireframes for the recording before class. This is loosely based on the Magic the Gathering project that Daniel did last year. So I don't have the features list right in front of me, but I can kind of remember what it was. In any case, I can kind of see what it was, or at least be reminded what it was just from looking at these. So you guys, as you're building these graphic representations of the tables, you should be using both the wireframes and the features list that you guys did, whichever one is helpful at any given moment. If you're looking at the wireframes and you come across a stumbling block, go reference the features list and vice versa. And then you'll be able to reference, when you're creating the EER diagrams, you shouldn't need anything more than this tables plan that we're going to build. So as a reminder, we've got we've got a users table over here, which is just like for login and password and profile information. And then the cards here is going to be the big data set of Magic the Gathering cards. And I think I remember which columns we wound up using for that. And then, the user needs to be able to add one or more of those cards to either a collection or a wish list or both, right? So starting out in Markdown here, and I guess this is something that I'm not really expecting. Usually for the in-class demos for the chapters, I'm expecting you guys to follow along with me, and then you could submit that, but there's really nothing that you guys need to submit for this one. You can follow along if you think it's going to be helpful. And I actually kind of recommend it, but it's not something that you have to submit anything at the end of the demo. Okay, so this is going to be the Magic the Gathering project, right? And there's my H1 with the 1 hash. I do the 2 hashes, I get an H2. This is going to be the tables clan. And then I'll go ahead and just list the tables. So there's these, first of all, the users. And I would think that you all would all start with the users table, I think, because that's the first thing that a potential user is going to have to be able to access, right? Before they can access the cards or build their own tables, they have to be able to create an account. Users that already have an account, they have to provide the credentials to get into the app and so on. So that's going to be the first thing. And then there's going to be, in this case, the cards table, right? In your case, it's going to be whatever your data is. I think several of you are doing cards of some kind or another. So yeah, you're going to have some table like this. And then I'm going to type in user collection. So the idea was that we built like a sample table for like a generic user. We called it user collection. If I were a user of the website or a client user, then I would have my own table called whatever was my login name, and then collection. Then I would have an LBISPO _ wish list. But just for proof of concept, we created this kind of generic one, right? We created a generic user. So user, what was it? Wish list, right? And I think this was all that we started with. So note the backticks. That's a way of doing a code in Markdown, but it's also, it kind of works nicely for this because this is also something that you can do in MySQL, right? When you're specifying column names and table names and so on, you can put backticks around them. In fact, that's what the default is. It's just that we all get lazy and we don't actually type those things in. Okay, so if we look back at the assignment, it says what we're looking for. We're looking for each of these tables, we're looking for a column name. We want the data type that's going to go into the column. And then we want the attributes like not null and unsigned and stuff like that. So to do that, I'm going to build a table view here in Markdown. And it's going to be like the temptation is going to be to put the column names along here because, hey, those are columns, right? They go up, they have to go up top and so on. You don't want to do it that way. There's a reason why when you're looking at the table inspector in Workbench, it turns those around and has the column names running down the left-hand side and then the other stuff going to the right of that. It just fits together better. It just works easier. It's easier to read and so on. So we're just going to do it that way. And it'll fit on the page better here too. So here I'm starting off a table, and in this GitHub flavored Markdown for tables, you have to put in a TH. For those of you who have not had any HTML, don't worry about it. For those of you who have, you know what I'm talking about. It's table heading or table header, depending on who you ask. And so I've got to put these headings up here, and then I'll show you what goes next. It's on the next line. It's got to be a series of things that look like they're going to be table cells, but they're just filled with 3 hyphens or 3 dashes, and that's what specifies or delimits the table headings row. So anyway, this is going to be, let's see, yeah, so it's going to be column. Let's go ahead and do these. Right, so column, like this is where we're putting in the column name underneath here, and then we're looking for the data type for the next one, and then attributes. And if it feels weird, like not really getting why, then you can put in like column attributes if you want to, or column data type. It's up to you. Just whatever makes the most sense to you, as long as it's clear. So these are like table cells, but over here it's not showing up as a table because I need to put the next line in, and this is going to be those 3 hyphens I was telling you about. So when I put in the first couple, you can see nothing happens over here, and it looks like it's kind of messy. But once I put the third one in, it turns into, oh, cool, now it's starting to look like a table, right? Just with 1 row in it, but there we go. These guys are necessary. You got to put those in for the second row. So I keep doing that. And then we start putting in the actual table data underneath. So for this users, if you're unsure where to begin, start out with the primary key. On almost all of these, you're going to be starting out with a primary key on each table, and it's going to be an integer. It's going to be not nullable, and it's going to be auto-incremented, which you guys know what that means. It keeps adding another number, just integer, one higher than the last integer, or one higher than the highest integer, rather. And then it's going to be a primary key. So I'm going to say ID, and I'll try to remember to put those little backticks around here just to be consistent. So that is the column name that we're starting with. The data type is going to be an int, right, integer. And then here's where we put in the attributes. Now, it's the primary key usually has the most attributes, so it's not nullable. This is one that shows up on a lot of the columns. It's an auto increment, and it is a primary key, like so. So those are going to be the attributes that we put onto this column. This is going to be the data type that we put onto this column. Now, I'm pretty sure that each of these four tables is going to start out like this. So if I want to, and if you want to, it's not a bad time to go ahead and just grab this whole thing so far, and I'm just going to copy it and just paste it right underneath all of these. So here's the cards, starts out the same way. Here's the user collection, starts out the same way. User wish list, of course, starts out the same way. Now, in this case, I'm not going to paste it down here because I'm expecting that user collection and user wish list, they really perform very similar functions. They're just kind of named different things. And so I'm expecting that I'll be able to copy this whole thing and paste it down here. But you know what? I'll go ahead and paste this down here just for fun, just to show that, yeah, these are all going to start the same way. If you're working alongside me, this would probably be a good time to save. And now we put in the stuff like kind of the obvious stuff that we know we need, that primary key, an ID, an int, and so on. So now we get into some of the other stuff. So the stuff that's going to be in the users table, it's going to be pretty similar between all of yours, I think. I think at the very least, in users, you're going to have a username, you're going to have a password, and you're going to have an email address, right? At the very least. I'll throw in a couple other things as possibilities. I remember when I'm looking over my wireframes here that there's this forgot password in here, which means that's part of my functionality. If it isn't, then I need to get rid of it. But that can mean something as simple as, oh, you forgot your password? Okay, we just sent you an email. Either update your password or just with your password information. Check your email. It'll be there in a few minutes. Or maybe it means that we give you a password hint or something. So I'm going to put both of these in. So the first things first. So let's put in like username, and this is going to be varchar. Now, I'm just leaving, like normally you to like put the print, this is a function, right? You put this in, you put in like the amount that you want. I think it's fine to keep things simple at this stage because like when I'm creating the EER diagram, I don't even pick, like it just picks varchar 45 for me automatically. And if I want to change it to something else, I have to do it manually. So even though the information is not quite complete here, I think that's okay. And then any attributes are going to go in here. Well, there's certainly one that I could think of. I think we need not null on this, right? I think anyone who's going to use our web app, I think they need to have a username. Now, so many of these are going to fit into this pattern of varchar for the data type and not null for the attributes that I'm just going to grab this whole column or this row here and copy it, and then I can just paste it however many times I need and just change like the column name or whatever. So I'm paste. Next one is going to be password. Looks like I got an extra space in there, so copy that again. Now, this really is not quite correct yet. For the password, it's not just going to be variable character. It's going to be a hashed variable character. So it's going to be like an MD5 or an SHA or something like that. Probably just MD5 for this class. And but we haven't even learned about that stuff. We'll learn about that after the midterm during the chapter on securing a database. And that chapter is mostly about creating users to access tables directly, which would be like the PHP developer or whatever. But I believe there's also a section in there on hashing passwords. If there isn't, we'll just go over it in class. It's pretty simple to do. So, but we don't have to worry about that for right now. For right now, our goal is to create the EER diagram, and for that, yeah, just leave it varchar, it's fine. So next up, I'm going to do, instead of like the email, I told you guys I was going to do the password hint, so I'll do the password hint here, like so, and then paste another one. It really does help to copy one of these and just paste it over and over again. Password hint answer or response or what have you. Remember about the verbosity of names. Is that a right word? Verbosity? I don't know. Don't get into the habit of like doing shorthand or doing acronyms for these. The one real exception, of course, is ID for identity. That's just kind of universal. So, but anything other than something that's universal and well accepted, you really want to be verbose with your naming conventions here. And use the underscores and just spell everything out. You'll only have to do it once or twice, and then after that it'll be done. Okay, and now finally, I will get around to getting that email address in. And once again, I'm being verbose about it. You guys might recall my own preference is that, like if this table name was address, then I wouldn't want to put in the address here because I think that's redundant, but it's not part of the name of here, so I am going to type out the full thing instead of just typing in email. Email by itself could kind of mean other stuff is the thing. I mean, it could be like a schedule for emailing out newsletters or something like that. I mean, who knows? Or it could be a list of email addresses or another database or something like that. So I think email address is the clearest thing in this case. Go ahead and type the whole thing out. Okay, how's everybody doing so far? Any questions? All right, cool. Let's go on and do the other ones here. So this is the graphic representation of the first table. So like I said, you don't have to use Markdown. If you want to use MS Paint to do this or something, you can. I don't know why you'd want to, but you certainly can. I just think this is the easiest way. Let's go ahead and do cards. So this is going to be the big data set, big data, right? So for cards, after ID, we've got the card name. We've got the set code, because the same card could have been published in multiple different sets. And then we have has foil. And what that means in this case is, was there ever a card issued under this name that has foil on it? So like the same card, or at least the same card name, could be published multiple times, and sometimes you have one, a certain publication or edition or whatever that has foil on the front of the card as one of the printing inks or whatever. So that's what has foil means. So card name first after ID, and like I just said, cards is in the name of the table. So I personally don't feel it necessary to say card name. There are people who would disagree with that though. So just as long as you're aware of that. Name, and this is going to be our varchar. Now this one, I can't just put not null here, because there are some cards in that table that we retrieved and then turned into the schema that did not have a name. They only had an ID. I don't know why. I don't know why there are some cards that did not have a name, but there were some that didn't have a name. So we couldn't do not null, or else we literally would not be able to import the data because it would freak out every time. So there's one of two things I could do here. One, I could just leave the attributes blank and say, well, you can have a null value here. That's okay. I would in fact say, I would go further with that. And I might say default null. And so what that means is that basically if you're importing the data and there were a field that was just empty, then instead of just leaving it empty, it would put in an actual null value instead. So you can think of this as a possibility for anything that might be like that. If you look over your table and there are some empty places where you're going to be importing, think about just putting in default null instead of leaving it blank, so that you have some kind of value in there, right? And it's not just empty, because emptiness, I guess that's undefined, right? And then that would be that would be kind of a different ballgame. Null is kind of easier to deal with in some ways. So anyway, there we go. There's the name, default null. So we're allowing for that. And then we've got, well, let's see, what was the next one? It was the set code, okay? So set code. And this is, again, going to be our old friend varchar. Now this one, the set codes are all 3 digits or 3 characters, as I recall. So you could do like varchar 3 if you wanted to control that, or rather char 3 if you know it was always going to be 3 digits. Then you know, maybe you want to put like just char instead of varchar. But at this stage, it doesn't really matter, so I'll just leave it at varchar for now. Basically, you would come to a decision when it's time for optimization. You know, does this thing run faster if I do a set number of characters and call it char3 instead of varchar whatever? Then, of course, you would change the data type. But for now, this is fine. So the set code, everything does have a set code, so this is going to be a non-null. And then the fourth one is has foil, which again means that at some point, if it comes out to true, that this card was at some point published and sold with a, you know, with some foil on the front. And he is all shiny and glossy, reflective. So it has foil, and this is going to be a Boolean. So if you want to, I know you guys have worked with Booleans before, you can just type in Boolean. That's what you used to see a lot. Increasingly, I'm seeing tinyInt. And for this one, I am going to type in the full thing, tinyInt1. Because basically this is just an integer. tinyInt1 only allows for 1 and 0, and that's it. And that is the same thing, as you guys know, as Boolean, true or false. And apparently, if you type in Boolean, it actually converts to a tinyInt1 when it at runtime. So there really is no benefit to using one or the other. So either one's fine. I've gotten in the habit of doing the tinyInt here, so I'll go ahead and put that in. And let's see, has foil. We could call this one probably not null, and then I think give it a default value. I think most cards do not have foil on them. So I would probably say default 0, I think, for that. Just look for a good default, as it's called in interface design, meaning, you know, can you reduce the cognitive load on your users? If they don't have to put in has foil and you have a default value for it, then go ahead and do that for them. Of course, I mean, you could handle this on the front end too. You could handle it in the JavaScript fills in a default value on the front end before it gets sent to the database or sent to the server. So I don't know, there's multiple ways of doing it. I'll go ahead and do it like this for now. So I think this is it for cards. It's got a lot of data, but it's actually a pretty simple structure in terms of the database columns themselves, or table columns. And here's what it looks like in the little table rendering. Okay, next up we'll do user collection, and like I said, I expect to be able to take this and just copy and paste it right down to user wish list because they look exactly the same as I recall. So after the primary key here, let's get the next one here. So this one is a little bit different from the card itself. It does have an ID here, but it's not going to have a name. I'm not going to have a name column for the user collection for the sub data, the smaller table that's being generated for each user. Why? It's redundant, right? I've already got the name of each card up in here in cards, if there is one for that card. I don't need to put it again down here. Remember in the AP database for the textbook, like there's a vendor name in vendors, but you don't then have a vendor name column in invoices as well. It's just not necessary, right? Instead, what you do is you put in a foreign key that references the ID in cards, and from which you could, join those two together or do a subquery and to retrieve the name from cards as you were doing a query on the user selection, right, or the user collection. So instead of name here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in cards ID, right? And you guys might remember this term, this naming convention. If you see something called cards ID in here, and especially if it shows up as a foreign key, then you know, oh yeah, this is a foreign key that's referencing the ID column in cards, right? It's just naming convention is near universal. So we'll do the cards ID, and this is going to be int. And I like to put in, let's see, this has to be not null first, right? And I'm going to go ahead and put in foreign key references. Hopefully this is looking a little bit familiar. Cards ID, right? Like so. So it's not really necessary to do all this stuff, but I think it helps. So we got the ID with the cards ID. Once you'll see, once we create the EER diagram, or while we're creating the EER diagram, we won't actually type this in to the table definition below when we're editing the table. We'll leave that till the end and then go ahead and just use those connectors that the graphic interface makes available to us, and it'll put this in for us. Okay, so there is the cards ID, which connects it to the cards table, and then we need condition, quantity, and whether or not it has foil, which I think we called is foil. Has foil was a better name, but it was confusing to have has foil up here meaning one thing and has foil down here meaning something not quite the same thing. So first of all, condition. Go away. Yep. Got my little backticks there. And the condition, so you could do this as a varchar, or you could simplify things a little bit by making it to an int and just having each of a set of numbers like 1 through 7 or something just stand in for one of the standard condition phrases or keywords or something. So I think there's like mint, near mint, very fine, fine, very good, good, and poor. I think those are the ones that they use in like comic books and trading cards and so on. So you could just number those like 1 through 7 or 0 through 6 if you really feel the need to, by being, because you're programmers. But I think that would be easier. But if you did it as varchar, that would be fine too. So the condition, I would think this would have a default of, I don't know, I think 6 is good condition. So maybe something like this. And I think that would be enough. I don't think you need to put not null in here. I think if it's got a default already, that'll be enough. If something does not get entered, then it'll give it a default value. All right, let's see. Let me count those again. So mint, near mint, very fine, fine, that's 4, very good, and yes, good is 6. Okay, cool. So something like this. And then let's see, what else do we have? Okay, quantity. So quantity, this is going to be an int. And let's go ahead and do, I'll introduce you to a couple more of these things here. We will do, what will we do? Unsigned. Let's do unsigned. So unsigned is basically an integer that cannot have negative values. It's like an absolute value, if you guys remember that term from math. And so, yeah, you can't have a negative quantity of cards, right? So doing unsigned. Now, would it hurt anything if you forget about this? No, I'm just showing you some stuff. This is a good place for a default. Let's put a default 1 here, because most of the time I would think when people are saying, yeah, I've got this card in my collection, or I want this card, so I'm putting it in my wish list, more often than not, they're going to have one of those cards, or at least more often than any other potential value. So default 1 makes sense to me there. And then finally, the has foil thing, which we kind of not really satisfied with, but is foil. So like, is a card that has foil? I don't know. If you guys can think of something better, let me know. But that at least is a little bit different from the has foil up here, which was confused when they were both the same thing. So is foil is again going to be tiny int 1, like upstairs there. for the data type, and then for the attributes, do not null and default 0 again. Yeah, just like above here. So most cards are not going to have foil on them, so that would be the 0, and then it would get changed to 1 if you had a card that did have foil on it. And unless I'm forgetting something, I think this looks pretty good. So here's the table over here. Here are the column names, data types, and attributes. I'm not 100% convinced about leaving out these not nulls. I may wind up putting them back in there when we do the EER diagram. I'm not sure. But this is good enough. This is close enough to feeling like the actual card table definitions. And I'm going to take this stuff here. Like I said, I only need the last 4. And as promised, I'm going to copy and just paste them right down here, because the user collection and the user wish list are really built exactly the same way. They have slightly different functions, but they're the actual workings of them and the way they're structured is identical to each other. Collection or wish list. Because you can wish for a certain quantity, like, oh, I want 3 of these, and I want to make sure that I'm getting only mint quality, you know, that sort of thing. And once again, the card's ID is going to reference the card's ID column, not its users. There we go, card's ID. So yeah, I think this looks good. So something like this, again, use any tool you want to. As before, I recommend Markdown because I think this is super simple to do. But it's whatever you're comfortable doing. Okay, so this is the first part of it. This is the tables plan. So once I got done with this, I'm not going to, but I would go ahead and save this as a markdown file or whatever, so that I've got this. I'm going to be expecting you guys to submit this to me along with the EER diagram. So this is the first part of the assignment over the weekend. Okay, let's get this guy done. Now on to the next part, which is the EER diagram itself. Now we've done this before. We created an EER diagram from an existing table, or at least I did that for the before class recording, and then we created a new one here, and that's what you're going to be wanting to do. So I'm going to pop over to Workbench, and again, here's the diagram that I did before class just to kind of warm up. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and we'll do it again. So as a reminder, to build an EER diagram in Workbench, you first want to go over here to the Home tab, shows the little house, and then go down to the second one, Models. This is your local instance here that you see when you first open the app. To go down here to the Models and click the plus sign to make a new model. And then that's not enough. You will then double click on Add Diagram to create the EER diagram. And here it is. Here we are. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of forget about the wireframes and stuff like that. I'm just going to whatever extent I need to reference something, I'm just going to reference the tables plan that I built in Markdown right before this. So as a reminder, we're going to be building new tables, creating a new table, placing a new table. Then we're going to edit that table to change the column definitions and data types and so on. And then once we've got all the tables on here, we will add whatever relationships we need to using these guys down here. So I will start by placing a new table, click on that, and just click wherever you want to put it. There's table 1. And then to edit, you can right click on the table over here and go to edit. You can right click on the table icon here, or you can double click on it, which is what I usually do. And so first off, here's the first table. I'm going to create the users table right here. I've got all my column names, I've got the data types, I've got the attributes ready to go. So boom, it's just a matter of kind of typing this stuff in, right, at this point. Now it's the easy part. So this is kind of why all this groundwork that I've had you guys do. A lot of people just like jump right into like, oh yeah, I'm going to be designing a database, so I'm going to jump right into the EER diagram. And over and over again, I've seen people just stumble and hit walls and not know what they're doing. And it's happened to me before too. But if you do these other steps first, right, if you do the features list, slap together some quick wireframes, and then do the tables plan here, and then they get to the EER diagram, and it's just like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what's happening here. Boom, bing, bam, done, right? So that's what we're searching for. That's why all the groundwork before we're doing this. So I just want to do cards first, but this is going to be users table. Probably want to start with that one. And then the column name, start off with the ID. And the only one you have to click over here is AI for auto increment. You do that, then it will automatically, oh yeah, this is the primary key, it's not nullable, and the data type is there. So type in ID and then click AI and you're done with that column. Next up, we've got username and the varchar and not null. That's it for that one. See how easy? Password. And again, varchar for now, although we'll be doing the hashing a bit later on in the semester. Not null, need a password. And I added, this time, the password hint, not null. And the password hint answer. And varchar fine. This one, like the password, will probably be hashed at some point, so it's got some level of encryption at least. But for now, just go ahead and call it the variable character and give it a not null attribute, and I think that's it. ID, username, password, password hint answer. Oh no, we need an email. Aha. Email address, and varchar is fine. Not null. Okay, cool. Let me check. So username, password hint answer, and email address. I think I've got all those in now. Yes. Okay, cool. And to get out of here, just go ahead and close the tab. And here we go. We've got a primary index, and that's it. So here is our user table that we're going to start with. And that's good. Now this one is not going to be connected to any other table. I'm not expecting it to be at the moment. Cards will definitely be collected to user collection and user wish list, but user is going to be its own thing. And you might think, well, what about that though? Because surely the user collection and the user wish list here are going to, this is the kind of our proof of concept, but they will be tied to individual users here. So won't those be connected to the users table? Well, not really. I mean, when you're talking about these kinds of EER relationships, you're talking about columns referencing each other, right? Not entire tables referencing each other. So there is no column in here that specifies what user we're talking about. You wouldn't want one because it would be too redundant. It would have the same user for every single entry, and it might be hundreds of entries, right? Instead, it's just going to be part of the name of the table. It's going to be Obispo collection or whatever. And so, yeah, it's referencing, the table name is referencing a column in here, referencing an entry, but there is no column here that's going to reference that. So we won't be using any kind of EER connection here. So anyway, that's a little side trip. Let's go ahead and do, let's do another table. So this one's going to be the cards. Create one here and just place it, double click or whatever to get to this guy, and this is going to be cards. And this is the simple one. So once again, we need the ID, and then click on AI for auto increment, and it'll fill in the rest for you. And here we have the card name. So I'm just going to put in name, varchar 45 is fine. And we're not going to put in NN here. Like automatically and by default just went over here to click this because you almost always need it. But in this case, we definitely don't want that because we want to be able to enter in null values here. Or we can put in a default. No, we don't want a default for that one. Well, we could actually. Let me see, what did we do here for this? We could put in default null. Yeah, we did do that for name. So let's go ahead and do that here. So the way you do a default expression is just click here underneath. It doesn't look like there's anything over here, but if you click there, then it actually is a text field, and you can put in the default value over here. So the default value in this case is just going to be null, right? And there we go. So that is the name. We have the set code. That's going to be another variable character, and that is going to be not null. And then as foil. And for this one, I'll also put in that default expression over here, which is going to be, oh wait, I need to change the data type first. Varchar is not it. As foil is going to be tinyInt. So this is one, like I was saying last time, on my Mac it doesn't do this. It only shows like 4 or 5 of these here. But on this one, it's kind of nice. Like you can just like look for it. It's going to be in here somewhere. And there, by the way, like I said, you can use Boolean if you want to. But tiny, not tiny text, tiny int. Isn't there a tiny int in here somewhere? No, I'm not seeing one. Well, in any case, oh, there it is. Tiny int. And then just type in 1 for the argument. And then we're going to put the default expression. It's going to be default 0. I think that's what we put. Yeah, default 0. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put these. Well, again, I don't think it's necessary. For some reason, my brain's not working tonight, but I don't think you actually, if you have a default value, I can't come up with a situation where you would have to say not null, because if a null value ever gets entered, or if no value ever gets entered, then it just turns into 0, right? Well, no, you know what? I just figured it out. It's because you could actually type in null. You could actually enter null, and that wouldn't work. So let's go ahead and do not null for that. So yeah, okay, I will do not nulls for these guys. Okay, so I think that's it. We got the ID, we got the name, we got the set code, we got the has foil, and that is it for the cards table. Lots of data, not much table structure. Go ahead and close that, and here is our cards table. Again, primary key and nothing else. All right, let's go ahead and build the next one. So the next ones, we could either choose to build the user collection or the user wish list. I'll do the user collection just because that's the first one I did here. And then we'll be able to duplicate it just like we kind of copied and pasted the stuff down here for user wish list. Then you can duplicate a table in Workbench. So once again, new table. And it doesn't really matter where you put it. I'll put it here. And this is, again, our proof of concept is for our generic user, so I'll just call it user collection. As with all the others, we're going to do ID, int, not null, primary key, auto increment. And the next column that we had here is this foreign key. But remember, you don't want to actually try putting in a foreign key. Not while you're typing in the columns and the data types and so on. I'm going to go ahead and do it right there in the graphic user interface of the diagram tab, diagram window. So I'm going to skip past cards ID, and you'll see how it gets generated later on. I'm going to jump to condition, quantity, and is foil. So let's go ahead and do those. So condition, and we called this one, I think we called it int, right? And this one is, like most of them, not null. And what did we say, like default 6, I think? Oh, I know, we were going to do unsigned. No, wait. We're going to do unsigned for quantity. That's right. So let's go ahead and do that one next. So quantity, and the quantity is definitely going to be an int. And this is the one that's unsigned, so it's going to be UN right over here. Which again is like absolute value. It means, come on, there we go. It means it can't have negative numbers. It's just integers from 0 on up. And the default expression here, we're going to put in 1 as the default. I think that's a good default. And then is foil. And is foil is going to be that tiny int, 1, or Boolean. Oh, really? I didn't like that, huh? Let me try that again. So this is, wait a second, I'm getting all confused here. Okay, it added a new column for me because I hit tab. Right, I know. don't want that column anymore though. Why you keep doing? We'll see if it adds it to the table here. Hopefully it won't. But it's like not allowing me to get rid of this column now. See, I suppose I can just Control Z here. Oh, good. There we go. Okay, cool. So sorry about that little detour there. So ID condition quantity, and we put the int, and the quantity has a default expression of null. And I said that I was going to start doing not nulls for that, or default expression of 1. Sorry. So tiny int 1, which is the same as Boolean in MySQL, is foil. And this one, not null, and our default expression here is going to be 0, which means it does not have foil. Okay, so I got those in, finally, but I skipped over the foreign key, which we'll add later. Okay, so here is the user collection. Scroll down a bit. I'll put this down here. And then indices, again, we just got the primary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first duplicate this, and then we'll go ahead and create the foreign key constraints on here. So the way that you duplicate this in Workbench, I'm going to do a right click on here, and then copy user collection. They didn't see fit to just put a duplicate in here somewhere, but go ahead and copy the whole thing, and then if you right click anywhere and paste user collection, and it says, hey, there's already one of these, do you want to duplicate it? You say, yeah, okay, duplicate it. And you might think, well, where'd it go? It's not there, but for whatever reason, no matter where you right click in here, it plunks it down right on top of the table that it copied from. So just drag this one out of the way, and there it is. Haha. Then all I have to do is rename this. So instead of user collection copy 1, double click to edit this, and we will call this user wish list. And boom. And we are done. Are we? Not quite. We still have to put in those foreign key constraints and get some relationships going here between these two and the cards table. Remember that these two are dependent on the cards table, right? They've got their own IDs and so on, but for the actual ID of the card, instead of storing it here or storing the name here, it's going to reference the cards table up here. So you guys might recall, here's where you do that. You're going to have a one-to-many relationship. Each card here might have multiple entries in here. Remember, there might be a card that has foil or is foil, and then another one that is not foil, and they both represent or reference the same card here, so that's a one-to-many relationship. Here's the one-to-many right there. You want the one with the dashed line. If you do the solid one, then it's going to try to relate the primary keys to each other. And you don't want to do that. You want to create a new foreign key that references the primary key up here. So it's this guy with the dashes. Click on that. Click on the referencing table, and then click on the referenced table. And there we go. There's our one-to-many relationship. And it added the foreign key down here. Now, don't worry if the naming convention is a little bit different from what we were doing with the textbook. Remember, the way we did it with the textbook is that, first of all, we did the name of the referencing table, and then FK, and then the name of the reference table after that. This one's a little bit different in that it puts FK at the beginning instead of in between these two. It doesn't really matter. Anyone will be able to look at this and see, oh yeah, this is a foreign key that references this guy up here. So either way is fine. Do the same thing here. Grab the 1 to n dashed line, click on user wish list, and then click on cards, so that we also get a one-to-many relationship going on over there. And if it bothers you that one of the connections here is like hiding underneath this overlapping table, then you can go ahead and just pull these out of the way. You can organize them however you want to, as long as it seems reasonably rational. Now, it's common, I was saying, there's nothing that really directly references users, at least not in the way these are referencing each other. So it's kind of common to take tables that are referencing each other and to put them into a layer, which is these guys here. And so you can do that. I'm not requiring it or anything, but probably not a bad idea to go ahead and drag these guys around here. And then I'm not even sure off the top of my head exactly what I would name it. But at least then, if you want to grab these guys all together and drag them around, I always do that. then they will all drag. You just drag the layer and all these will drag along with it. And it kind of organizes things a little bit. So at this point, I'm calling it good, except I don't like this bit 3 more. Go ahead and drag this down until you can actually see all the columns. There we go. And notice, by the way, not only I kind of pointed down here, but
You don't like the mystery?
like the mystery, no, not when I'm coding. I want to be able to see everything. I was pointing towards the foreign key constraint names down here. That's not going to let me do that. But notice that it did actually put the columns in here as well. And cards ID was exactly what I wanted to name those columns. But we didn't type it in manually because we knew that it was going to get added as soon as we created this relationship in the diagram, which it did. There we go. There's the cards ID. It's the red diamond, which shows that it's the foreign key. And it's filled in, which shows that it's not nullable, and so on. So the final thing with this is just to go File and Save, or Control S, and save this as a workbench model, and MWB is the extension name. For this one, I'm asking, if you look at the assignment, I think I asked you to name the zip file something in particular, but the files within it don't have to have that usual naming convention. It could be just the name of your project, so I might even just call this mtg.mwb. And we are in Unit 4 now, and I don't have Unit 4, so let me go ahead and make one. And we'll go in here and save it. And there we go. So now, if you submit that, I will be able to open up this EER diagram on my end and take a look at it. And this other one, again, this will depend on whatever file format or just format in general you're using for this. But if I go ahead and save this, then I might call this mtg.md, right? So I've got, let's see, I'm getting Unit 4 here. So I've got mtg.mwb, and now I've got mtg.md. I'll know which one it is. If you want to be more explicit about it, you might go like, mtg tables or something like that, or table plan or table graphics. Anything like that is fine. And then to get it submitted, I asked you guys to, let's see, zip them together. So I assume that you guys know how to zip files together, but just to show you the final step here, Unit 4, here are these guys, and then I just drag across both of them, do a right click, and compress the zip file. And this one, we do want to call, like, my naming convention, and what happens after, I mean, the most important thing is just that you put your last name at the beginning of the file name. That just, I can't tell you how much that helps me in terms of organization and so on. So just Bispo MTG, or if I ask for something in particular, oh, I think I asked for EER. So yeah, go ahead and call it your last name and then EER, and then go ahead and submit the zip file to me with those two files in it. Okay, I think that is everything then. Any question about doing this assignment, about doing the tables plan, or about doing the EER diagram for them, or anything like that? All right, let me go ahead and stop the share, and then I will stop the recording.